Hey, Aaron, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, good. Yeah. So, welcome to the Autistic Reality podcast, where we interview artists, entertainers, politicians, business owners, you name it, with our own disability spin on things. And of course, entertainment is very important to what we do. So, Aaron, I have to say, we kind of got our start in the same place, didn't
We
we?
did. Yeah, Ithaca, New York. Yeah,
Want to talk about that? The comic book club and stuff like that?
sure. I don't know about for you. For me, it was a really wonderful influence on having a group of people to look up to that were into what I wanted to do with my life.
Yeah,
Camilla and Roger Stern,
yeah,
um, uh, Bill and Tim, and
yeah.
everybody up in Ithaca that is a big comic book fan.
It's hard to imagine that Roger has done everything he's done. Uh,
Yeah,
you know, somebody at MTV once called him the best writer of the 1980s. You know, and you look at him; he's quiet and unassuming, and you don't realize that he literally did the death of Superman thing.
right,
I don't think his
right.
book's ever been off the New York Times bestseller list. And Carmel is one of the most loving people I've ever met.
She's
And
wonderful.
yeah, yeah. Shout
Yeah,
out to you, Carmela. And
yeah.
Tim, is the world fireworks champion several times over. I mean, that's Bill. That's Bill. That's Bill. Yeah, yeah,
Oh, I was gonna say, I was like, I didn't
yeah.
know
But
Tim was
Tim,
into fireworks.
yeah.
Bill was into fireworks. Yeah.
So, Comic Book Club of Ithaca has something very special about it, which is it is, as far as we are able to tell, the oldest continuously active comic book club in the country, probably the world.
Wow. I I must have known that. I didn't recall that but really?
Yeah, it was started as
San
a
Diego doesn't isn't longer?
club,
I mean, I have
club,
no
not
idea, but
convention, club. Um,
oh, okay.
uh, it was started as a middle school club by Tim Gray, Aaron Pitchell, and Bill Turner. Tim and Aaron were in middle school. Bill was out at that
I didn't
point,
know they were in middle
and
school together.
it
Yeah.
was started in like 1971 or something. And by 73, they were incorporated as a not-for-profit to
Wow.
allow people like Bill to join.
Yeah.
And there are other clubs that started earlier that had to shut down for a while, but the Comic Book Club of Ithaca is still going very strong. I still go back to meetings when I head to town. And
Nice.
it also, you are right about San Diego Comic Con. That's the oldest Comic Con, but Ithacon
Gotcha.
is the second oldest. So,
Nice.
yeah. So, did the club facilitate like creative energies for you in some way, or
I think, you know, so when I was growing up, there, I moved around a lot as a kid.
yeah,
Um, uh, and so comic books were a way for me to connect with people, whether it was just like uh, just the fact of being a kid that didn't have a whole lot of friends right away, um, that I was able to connect to these comic book characters, and then uh, the comic book club and other organizations like it allowed me to meet people that were also into these other worlds that I didn't really know so many people were into at the time.
yeah. They
Um,
have all sorts of wonderful meetings. Like they do radio show readings, and they
oh,
uh,
nice.
talk about things with common themes and Christmas in
Yeah.
July.
Oh, I didn't know about the Christmas in July. That's great.
They
Um,
sometimes do. It depends on, you know,
sure.
First meeting I ever attended was Bill giving a rundown of the creation of the Hal Jordan Green Lantern.
Right.
And, so just to finish up on that note, what years were you in Ithaca?
Ooh, tough one. Because I've bounced, like I said, I bounced around a lot. I think 90 to 96 or 7, and then left, came back probably 2002, probably before that. Man, basically I've been in Ithaca or around Ithaca since 1990. My parents have lived there since my dad and my stepmother have lived there since 1990. So regardless of whether I left the area, I still came back quite a bit.
Great. So I was there from '04, moved there after high school to 2010 when I went to Buffalo to do undergrad and grad school.
Right.
Now I am in DC, well, right across the border in Tacoma Park, Maryland. But
Okay.
I come back to Ithaca frequently for Ithacon and things like that. Um,
Nice.
so did you go to any of the schools in the area?
Yeah, I went to DeWitt Middle School. I went to Ithaca High School for a little bit, and then I graduated high school from Cascadilla.
Cool. Yeah. So Ithacon is, of course, now very much affiliated with Ithaca College. That they kind
Oh,
of
I didn't
saved,
know that.
yeah, they saved the show because the women's community building was torn down where they had it for about
Right.
10 years at least, and the only other venue at the time downtown that actually, I mean, there were some hotels that like had turned their event space into offices and things like that. So
Mm-hmm.
the Hotel Ithaca was the only people who actually had space down there, and because they were the only people, they charged an arm and a leg.
Wow.
So
They got what they could because they had a monopoly on it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So Kate Kittredge, professor at Ithaca College, was very much into literary and cultural events, and
Yeah. I
saw
know
an
Kate.
article. Yeah, the last time you and I met, I think, was the year it was at that junk store in the Commons.
Yeah. It turned into a poster shop for a while, right?
It was an office supply store for the longest time,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
then
yeah.
that was
Right.
that was.
And actually Aaron Pitchell, the guy who helped start the Ithaca
Yeah,
Comic Club, he was the one who had it as a poster store or something like that, I think.
he had his poster store was a few doors down.
Oh, okay. But
And yeah,
he was running
Aaron,
the
by the
building, I
way,
think.
started the club by putting an ad in the middle school paper. And if any of you are interested in seeing where it all started, go to Buffalo Street Books in the DeWitt Mall. That used to be the cafeteria of the school they were at. So Ithaca doesn't. Ithaca.
Wow, they went to school in DeWitt Mall.
It
Wow.
was a school back then.
I knew it was a school at one point. I didn't realize that it was, uh, not that long ago. I mean, it's a very old building.
Yeah.
I had assumed it was more like my grandparents' age people that went to school there, not
I there's a small chance I could be
half a
wrong,
generation
but
away.
they actually had this basically this tin can shack on Stewart Lake where they would hold events like club meetings and stuff for the school,
Uh-huh.
and that of course has been torn down. But Ithaca made the mistake of tearing down a few too many wonderful monuments up until relatively recently. So now they have very strict rules about not getting rid of anything.
Oh, good. Uh,
So
And I knew that Ithaca was growing a lot lately, and last couple of times I visited, I barely recognized it. It's very it's getting taller at least.
The
That's
trouble is, you see, there's no way you can. Okay, a lot of people locally don't know where to live, that to be affordable, and the students tend to scoop up all of the apartments because they have like endless cash, and
yeah.
the students at Ithaca College and Cornell University. So they have, trying to incentivize local people to move into these places. So yeah, Ithaca College. When we were at that weird junk shop, Ithaca College newspaper sent some students to cover it, and I helped deal with the logistics of that. And Professor Kittredge saw that and decided to host the show. And thereafter, well, with the exception, this is the first year without an Ithacon in 45 years, and
What?
due to the epidemic.
Oh, COVID,
And
right?
yeah,
That makes
it
sense.
was
Yeah.
just about to go on at that time. I actually had to refund my tickets. So
Oh, bummer.
yeah, so but they've done a lot with their panels now again at Ithacon, and gaming rooms, and quiet space for people who need to de-stress, and yeah, their costume contests and things like that. And
Wonderful.
we have the full might of Ithaca College's considerable budget behind us now to do that. And
That's always nice.
yeah, yeah, I mean, for several years it was, it was a room a little smaller than a high school gymnasium at the women's community
Right.
building, with no panel discussions, no
You
costume.
were you around when there's the Masons building? It's kind
No,
of across the street. Was that before your time?
that was before my time.
Okay. There was
So
one show that was held. It was the first time that like I remember it being affiliated with the women's community building, but it was a really great show because it was probably maybe a year or two after the death of Superman. Comics were just huge in the country as a market, and there were just a ton of creators that came down for it. It was held in the Masons building. I can't remember the name of that building. There's been a number of like bars and restaurants and things that have opened and
yeah,
closed there.
it's been pretty much empty for years now.
Yeah. Yeah, Bart Sears was there, Joe Duffy. I know Walt Simonson came one year. I don't think it was the year that we were in that building also.
One thing I love
Um,
about Ithacon is that the people in the club are so well connected, and we can get some. Ithaca isn't the biggest town out there, but we can get names like Jim Shooter by saying, "Hey,
mhm.
mind, just yeah." And
And well, it was nice, I think, back in the day because so many of the talent of comic books lived in New York City to be near the bullpen and stuff. And having a show that was just a few hours north of the city allowed them to get out of the city and have a nice weekend and stuff like that.
yeah,
A little country vacay.
yeah.
um,
So well, it's like a college, and it's got all that going on. But you have, since, holy crap, you've done. You see, the comic book club doesn't just have good talent in it, but it tends to generate some really cool talent. And you have lived the dream. You've done Superman, Spider-Man. I mean, tell us about how you've gone professional.
well, okay. So as you know, I've always drawn. Um, it, it's it, you know, having moved so many places in my life, having a sketchbook was like having a best friend around. It allowed me to escape everything that was going on around me and just be in my own little peaceful bubble. Let's see. So that translated to me connecting with people like Ithaca, the Ithaca Comic Book Club, and then venturing out when the internet got bigger to various internet forums and stuff like that, which connected me with a group called 10 Ton Studios. And they were a bunch of folks that, like me, wanted to become a comic book artist. Although I gotta say, they were a lot more diligent about actually like actively trying to be a comic book artist. I was pretty okay with just working my day job and drawing at night, sort of thing.
What was the day job, if you don't mind me asking?
There were a lot over the years. For a while there, I worked for Gimme Coffee as a coffee bean delivery guy.
Cool.
And I was a barista and stuff like that. I was a bartender. I worked as an electrician right before I got into comic books. That's the great thing about doing art in a fairly prevalent area. Art is something that you take with you no matter where you go. And it allowed me to move to the various places that I've lived and pick up odd jobs and stuff like that and be able to survive between the day job and the art
There's
stuff.
certainly a lot of odd jobs in Ithaca.
Yeah. I remember one of my early jobs was let's see, I was hired at a local storefront on the Commons. I honestly don't even remember the name of it. And I would work the cash register, but that wasn't my main job. My main job was painting. This is back in like high school. Hand painting greeting cards that are like, it was basically, I was a colorist for these greeting cards, and I would paint in these flowers and stuff. It was probably by far like the weirdest job. I think I was paid by card. I don't know. I didn't do it very long, but
My mom went to Ithaca College. My mom went to Ithaca College back in like the 70s, early 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And she had a job in a donut shop, and which meant she got to take the day-old donuts home to her roommates. She was very popular.
Yeah.
But she said, yes, believe it or not, you can get sick of donuts, And so
I believe it. I believe it.
yeah. And speaking of storefronts, one of the more prominent shops in Ithaca at the time was Harold's Army Navy Supply Store.
Yeah,
And
I remember.
yeah. And she said that they sold pants and shirts that were shot through with bullet holes, and they marketed it as they marketed it as, come buy these pants and shirt that were shot through in Vietnam. And then of course it was
right, they weren't.
it was debunked one day
Right.
when someone heard a bunch of gunshots and just saw them shooting him up back the store,
Wow, I hadn't heard that story. That's a good one. Yeah, I believe Harold's was like one of those places where I got multiple Halloween costumes. They always had a big box full of random stuff.
Yeah, back to starting in the industry, 1010 Studios, and
oh yeah, well, so it was 10 Ton Studios, and they so it was a bunch of creators that wanted to get into comic books, but like just weren't quite there. And they had this like weekly challenge that so you would draw a picture, you'd scan it in, you'd post it on this forum, and of whatever character that was pulled for the week, and then everybody would vote on which drawing they liked the most of that character. And the winner got to select one of the other drawings. So like if you lost, you had to physically mail your piece of artwork to the winner of that week's challenge. And so it really ups the stakes, and it made everybody bring like their best game to each week's challenge. And that produced a bunch of creators that are very popular in the industry now, like Riley Brown, Chris Burnham, Koi Fem, Charles Paul Wilson III, Doug Hill, who does a lot of stuff with wrestling comics and Clip Studios. It used to be called Manga Studio. Nick Patera. Man, there's so many names.
Yeah.
Anyway, so all of these people basically were doing their thing, got connected with 10ton, and that energy propelled each other to push harder. Those weekly sketch challenges taught us to meet deadlines. Maybe I should start doing some more of those.
COVID's got to us all.
Yeah. But so that propelled me to work harder at the craft of comic book art. I've done a lot of art over the years, but comic book art is well, I sometimes don't even like to call it art. It's illustration. There's a technical side to it that comic art doesn't quite capture, and the term art, I don't demean it by saying it's not art at all.
It is art.
It is. It's a kind of art, but I think of the art of it is the collection in the book, the story, and the impact it leaves you with as a whole product. Whereas, if you go to a museum and you see a painting, that is the whole product. That image is the whole product. And so it's just a different experience of art.
Yeah, the writing is so important too.
Yeah, it's such a community. There are very few other industries that have such a connection between different people doing different things and coming together and creating this one product. It's really amazing. It blows my mind every time I think about it.
Yeah, I went to New York City with a colleague and was able to visit Marvel a couple times, and that collegial atmosphere they've got going right there, down to the decoration and the layout of the place. It's I don't use this word lightly. It's a brotherhood, really, and
Yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah. There's all kinds of people that make comic books, but the ones that I think last the test of time are usually some of the nicest people, the kinds of folks that grew up with the mentality of give somebody the shirt off your back sort of thing, in order to make the world as good as you can.
I saw that Marvel Universe of Superheroes exhibit at the Franklin Institute, and
Nice.
I was at the opening right next to a dear friend of mine, Joe Casada, and he's actually also been a guest on this podcast. There's also a YouTube video of him,
Oh,
and
cool.
he
You've
was
probably hung out with him more than I have.
he is so kind and has such amazing stories to tell. but he this exhibit, very first room, it says it was basically Jack Kirby talking about how he and his family were all immigrants and how they came from people who were less fortunate, and
Yeah.
how telling stories lifted people up. And then they have Stan Lee, of course, talking about the everyday person.
Oh, Stan. Yeah.
There are people who diminish the impact of comic books, and they have no clue what they're talking about. From Green Lantern, Green Arrow, the beautiful issue, what was it, 70s, early 80s, where the older African American gentleman confronts Green Lantern and says, I've heard you've done a lot of things for the purple skins and the pink skins,
Right.
but you don't seem to have done anything for the black skins, you know. And
Yeah.
also both Green Arrow and Spider-Man comics dealt a lot with drug addiction back when it was technically criminal for comics to address that,
Right.
and
I think it was criminal for them to show it. I don't know. I'm kind of hazy as to what all the authority code stuff
from what I
was.
understand, a certain issue of Spider-Man that dealt with Harry Osborn's drug addiction actually had to go without the authority code,
Oh wow.
and was threatened by the arts people at the White House, apparently. So, yeah,
Imagine that.
that was
Yeah.
yeah,
You
and
know, that's one of the things that I love about comic books so much. Uh, especially especially the comic books that we grew up with. Um, they self-regulated in a way. Um, you know, they questioned the boundaries of their own characters in what is it to be a hero, what is it to stand up and do what's right. um, and you find that with dealing with drug addiction, dealing with race relations, dealing with um, the imbalances of equality and
X-Men was entirely a civil rights title.
oh,
It didn't even
for
pretend not to
sure.
be, you know.
I think what really what always appealed to me was the way that um, the the way that comic books empowered your own voice, um, helped you realize that the downtrodden can speak up, realize that because as a kid who moved around a lot and um,
Can you hold
had my
that
had
thought
my
for
own
just a
had
sec?
my own sure.
Well, so, um, Tim in Ithaca, the comic book guy, is a curmudgeon, but he is our curmudgeon. He is a really awesome guy. And in 1992, Marvel came out with Alpha Flight 106, which was the first superhero to come out of the closet. That was North Star.
Yeah.
And in 1992, a woman, got it bagged and bought it from Tim. Shortly before I moved there, she sold it back, still in the bag, and it's still in the bag to this day.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I have that issue. Yeah.
Yeah, except this is like beyond mint. It hasn't been opened since it was made.
That's wonderful. Yeah.
So this is Alpha Flight 106, and I also have Uh, when North Star got married, they did draw your own cover issues, and here
Oh yeah,
you did Obsidian or Todd Rice and his
yeah,
boyfriend Damon Matthews from Manhunter on this draw your own cover issue. And
nice.
I've got this all hanging on one wall of my apartment.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, I'm honored.
Yeah, and
That's great. Yeah, and that's what I mean. It comic books are a gateway to being able to communicate, to being able to connect with people that you might never have the chance to, and those are invaluable, invaluable qualities that we need more of today.
so I
Um,
also have uh, got to get one more thing.
okay.
No, this would be the prop issue, but it is. So this goes into a big question I have in a limited series of Daredevil called End of Days, issue 7 here. A character who
Right
was
on.
invented in 2001, 2002 as a kid by Bendis was the writer, and I think Mac was the artist. He was autistic, and in this
Uh,
issue, he is mostly grown up, and he's revealed as the next Daredevil after our
oh
Daredevil
wow.
passes away. And this beautiful fan art of him, and
Oh nice.
so I that is a big piece of what I do is disability and entertainment. So you're literally feeding into our big fat question.
Okay.
There are people with disabilities who are creative, artists, writers, set designers, costumers,
Across the board.
game programmers, you name it, anything. We can do anything. We can. I mean, I'm a disabled pop culture critic amongst many other things. We can create. Yet we are often excluded from the creative field. Some people just aren't aware we're out there. Other people don't seem to be looking for us. Other people,
Right.
unfortunately, actively avoid us. For disabled creators, what are your tips on getting involved in the art scene? And what are your tips to the art scene for involving disabled creators?
So I think the bottom line, regardless of who you are, where you're from, um, is to do. If you have a story in your mind, make it. Whether you write it down or you draw it, like make your story the most important thing in the world to you. And that will give you something to hold in your hand, and that will allow you to hand that something to somebody else and say, look at this, I can do this, this is a part of me. And that I can tell you right now, the number of people that have come up to me and said, hey, I really want to get into comics, like how do I do it and stuff like that. It doesn't matter who you are or where you're from. If you have a product in your hand, if you have something that says this is something that I did, you are 100 miles ahead of everybody else.
I can confirm
That
that
has
actually.
yeah, that has if somebody's coming up to me with samples and they're samples of a character that like if there's samples with Spider-Man in it or Batman in it or something like that, that's all well and good, and that can show you have skill. But you need to be able to show that you could think about your characters. You like. I mean, there are plenty of artists out there and plenty of creators out there that can get by with just doing the job, but you're not gonna stay around. You're not gonna be able to maintain your love for the job if you don't love the characters. And the best way to show that is by creating your own and doing something of your own and putting that out there, because that has more heart in it than a lot of other things that you could show.
I have never told the so I do not, I swear I do not mean to become a Carrot Top today, but I have one more thing that everyone has
okay. Oh, I get it, Carrot Top, right?
Okay, this is how I became involved in the creative world. A bit of backstory. I was doing a disabled, I haven't told this to my podcast listeners or my YouTubers yet. I was in a disability studies class, my very first semester of disability studies master's degree at the University at Buffalo. And I was doing some research and realized about this autistic character I told you about. First properly rendered. I mean, Marvel had unfortunately did something incorrect in like the 80s or 90s, but this is the first properly rendered autistic superhero. I did a paper about it for this master's class, Intro to Disability Studies. My advisor must have had other things in his mind other than advising me, because I went to him and I said, "Is there any chance that this can be published?" And he said, "Not bloody likely." And I said, "Is there any chance that I can make money off of this?" He laughed at me. Well, I went to the comic book guy, not in Ithaca, but in Buffalo. Hi, Emil. Emil Novak Sr. runs the Queen City Bookstore, which is a comic book store. It's the oldest bookstore in Western New York, which unfortunately says a lot about the state of business there. But he also runs Buffalo Comic Con. He runs Vision's Comic Art Group, a group of people who create comics locally. He also has an independent film studio and came out with a damn good film about Frankenstein, the man, and how he loses his morality when creating his monster. This was called Frankenstein's Patchwork Monster, and I encourage people to look it up. So I went to him and he said, "Yeah, we have these people with visions who've got artist talent. We've got people who can help with formatting and things. We can get you a little booklet published."
Nice.
This
That's awesome.
is like the first edition was like 9 pages, 10 pages. The second edition was like 15 pages. That's on the wall over there. But and that was pretty cool. And I sold it at like his shows and things like that. It wasn't as big a deal as my big like 250, 300 page book I've got now. But what that allowed me to do is I had a few spare copies after I left Buffalo, and I was living
Yeah.
in Ithaca, New York, on my way to living here in the DC area when I had been trying to contact Bendis, who created the character, for quite some time. Bendis is really busy. So I said, well, if he won't answer me, I'll go to his boss. Turns out that Joe Quesada was giving a meet and greet if you paid a certain amount
Sure.
at Fan Expo in Toronto.
Hmm.
And this is exactly what Aaron's saying. I took this and I gave a copy to Joe Quesada, and I said, I've got this really cool idea. It's not a comic book, not a traditional comic book. It's a lit review of a really pioneering character you got. And so he put me in touch with certain editors and people like that. And he got me, and you know, it got me his friendship, and it got me intros into the creative world. Not to mention, I gave a copy to Stan Lee, who promised to read it when he got home. And I have a
Yeah.
photo with him, and I also got his autograph. And when the new book came out, like 2.5 years later, my colleague who knew Stan Lee's personal manager, not one of the abusive a-holes, but the actual good guy,
Sure.
was able to get the book to Stan, and he got it before he passed away. So
That's wonderful.
that is how Aaron is actually right. Having a literal physical copy to show to someone like Joe, for example, or Stan Lee,
Yeah,
will literally get you places.
absolutely. Absolutely. And you could have talked to Joe about your idea for this character or for this lib review, and that would have been well and good, but it wouldn't have made the connection that you obviously have with him without having that product, without having that thing in hand. That's a really great story. Yeah.
Yeah, and I haven't told this to the gang yet. I've got a painted portrait over there. I'm going to leave it over there of a painted portrait of Daredevil signed by Stan Lee, Joe Quesada, Charlie Cox, and Alex Milev. And I have a promise from Brian to eventually get Bendis to eventually get it signed.
Oh, wonderful.
So thank you for that tip. Now you've worked a lot of titles. What was your favorite or most challenging title you've worked on?
Oh, my favorite one is probably always going to be the one I'm working on at the moment. Um, uh, there are things about every book that I've done that I'm proud of, and other things I wish I might be able to go back and change. Um, uh, and as far as challenges go, I've worked in some on like such a variety of books that each book has its own uh, pits and traps and stuff like that. So like when I was working on Guardians of the Galaxy, I was creating space and spaceships and aliens and things like that to not just as a way to enhance the story, but also to create my own signature of what this book should look like for me. I just got done doing a run on Ghost Rider, and same thing with creating a tone of the villains and all the demons and all the creatures and all the different shapes and sizes that they come in. That's kind of the fun part for me. Um, I often say that drawing a comic book is about 10% creative and 90% work. Um, and that part of that 10% pulling, you have to find the joy to pull out from that 10% throughout your day. And one of the ways that I would do that was by creating a whole plethora of crazy demons or crazy aliens, and that became the thing that propelled me through drawing all the pages. Um, let's see. And there's other sides to it too, where when you're doing a book with a bunch of characters from across the spectrum of whatever company you're working for, looking up the reference can be a drag. Trying to find the way that each character should look.
There
I
was
have
a
to get frustrated.
Batman. There was a Batman run a few years ago where I don't know the artist's name, or I mean the writer's name, but from what I understand, he's basically a pariah in the industry now because he didn't look up any of the continuity of where characters were supposed to be, and created.
Yeah,
Yeah, you got to know where you are in universe.
yeah, absolutely. That's just as important as knowing the essence of a character. If you, I think Dan Slott was tweeting out the other day about how some characters are Yankees fans and some characters are Mets fans. And not being a sports guy, I would never have known that. But Dan's got a steel trap up between his ears, and he never lets any of that stuff go. But those are the things to know. Those are the things to pay attention to like really understand your characters, and know that there are things that a character can do. Any character could do anything, but the situation and circumstances have to be right. When there was all that hoopla about whether Superman would kill in after Man of Steel and stuff like that, I do believe that any character put in the right position, right circumstances, would do anything if the story is right. I personally didn't believe that the story was right for that movie, but you get what I'm saying. Like, you have to know the character, and if
There's
what
a
you
lot of
want to
psychology
happen,
that goes into that.
yeah, if the thing that you want to happen as a writer or as a creative is against the moral compass of the character, or the moral, like the soul of the character, as it were, you have to think about how to put that character in that position. Well, I mean, and as the artist, you have to know that character backwards and forwards. Know their little personal ticks, their physical traits of how they move, how they would think. But and that's stuff we don't even see in comics. You see it in the movies and the cartoons, but like there was a scene in Guardians of the Galaxy where I had the whole team sitting around and they're having the powwow sort of thing, and for no reason I thought, oh, I'm going to give Star-Lord a soda cup, because it's just kind of like a silly thing, because they're out in space. Where are they going to get drive-through? Sort of mentality. He's like throwing the ice back in his mouth, like you do when you get to the bottom of a drink. It's putting those character ideas in the background, and giving that really breathes life into them.
I love in the Captain Marvel comics and the film that you follow the journey of this totally awesome cat who had a fan following before the film even started. They did they did like 5 hours of watch the cat go from set to set of the movie or something like that. You know?
I
And
didn't
so,
realize
and
that,
all
but
it was they were putting a different picture in back of it, you know. But
yeah, nice.
people gobbled this up. Cats are great entertainment. So then,
Yeah,
of course, it's not just a cat; it's a very deadly alien with a dimensional portal in its mouth. You know,
right,
so
right.
so you know, knowing that
What was
people
the name
like
of the cat?
cats, you know.
Uh,
So
I
anyway,
just
so what's your favorite Marvel film
oh
in this universe?
man, that's a tougher question I would have thought. Um I love Captain Marvel. I love man. I have to think about all of them because there's qu- quite a few now.
Mine might be Black
Big
Panther.
hit. Black Panther's amazing. Um, I was just about to say Big Hero 6.
Yeah,
Um, it's not
that
often
is
lumped in with
actually
the
in
Marvel.
universe.
Yeah, it is, but it's not
Don't
often
find out
thought
till
of,
after the credits, though.
right? um, yeah, Black Panther's definitely huge. That was one of the. I will honestly say that's one of the few that made me cry. Um, yeah, well, I don't think of them as favorites. I think of them as like the ones that really impacted me.
I think
Um,
every one of them has their own properties, you know, like every
sure.
franchise, Iron Man, Black Panther, Captain America, Hulk has their own attributes that make it unique. And it's like you can pick a favorite one in those,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. I was just thinking as you were saying that, like, I could say like, okay, I like Winter Soldier more than Civil War or something like that. But it's tough to take all of them and whittle them down to just a few. Um,
You know, Endgame
plus, I'm
was
yeah,
cathartic. It was wonderful to see this all end up.
oh, yeah.
I just don't think that it was the best one they had put out, you know.
For cinema, for like what you like, for what you want from a movie, I don't think it's anything that we've seen before. Um, I think that they were able to do something that we were used to in comic books, where you have the the big team up movement,
Right.
crossover event sort of thing, um, without selling it like a crossover event. um, and they were able to do that in the movie, and I would say for the first time. Like there have been other like the Arrow universe, the Arrow Flash stuff of DC's TV stuff that have done crossover event type things, but it's always been for the event. Um, it's never been about the story.
And that's the thing is, you know, I
Like,
love certain DC titles and stuff. I read Green Lantern religiously for a few years, you know, and Batman
mhm.
is almost always without flaw. That big exception I told you about, but DC under Dan DiDio became way too event centered, you know.
Yeah, well, they sell.
Yeah,
that's why the
yes, but
DC is into them. So,
they felt completely contrived. You know,
yep.
like you're looking at the first issue of Infinite Crisis, and it's Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman standing there, and they're like, "Well, shit has gone to hell," and I'm like, "So you're just throwing us in the middle of this crisis." You know, and it turns out you had to read like 10 billion countdown books to see kind of sort of
Yeah.
what was going on, you know. They're trying to sell books, you know.
It's been my experience. Well, that's got to be their goal on some level of trying to sell books because the books well, you know, there's a mantra that like they say that the books just aren't selling as well, and they're not. But there's so many other elements to the properties that they're bringing in money. I think the problem with a lot of um, events these days is that, and you know, I never did an event book in the 90s or the 80s or anything like that. Um, I think that, you know, there's some event books that we look to as like biblical sort of stature of, like, you know, the Infinity Gauntlet comic book, the Watchmen, the Crisis crossover. You know, I think one of the ways that those worked, and this is mostly guesswork on my part, is because a lot of those people were in the room. And you could turn to another editor and be like, hey, can we use this character, or is this character on the table right now, or is this um uh you had an immediate community about making an event, and there's a synergy to being in the room together. There's a synergy to creatives when they're in a room and they're just creating something from the heart, that nothing beats it. I don't care how many Zoom calls, how advanced Zoom gets or anything like that.
Yeah.
Uh,
Or have you ever heard of Roger's story of how he wrote his book?
no.
Oh God, this was before email. So you literally had he had to write the Bible basically on the death and rebirth of Superman, right?
Mm,
And this was before email, so he had people FedExing scripts to each other, and like
right.
racing to FedEx scripts. And then at some point of it, he injured his backside, so there he is, like laying on a chaise lounge with his arms over the and
Yeah.
yeah, and he had to keep up with each new story like the day after it was written, you know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I think I you know, there is something to, when the fires get going, they just get going. And I think it's when you stop and say, and really analyze, well, will this sell, is when you're impeding the idea of a story. It's a road bump. It's always it's a trick to storytelling, to try to tell, to create a story that the people who publish the book will think will sell. It's not even a matter of like, will it sell or not. But there's an element of trying to hook it to the people that are going to buy it. And I don't mean the customers, I mean the people that will print it,
yeah,
as a
distributors.
creative. Oh,
So,
I mean, even the company, if I'm pitching a story to Marvel or DC, I've got um, I've got to phrase it in a way that will connect with their idea of making a profit on some level. I mean, it's by no means is it like my main motivation. That's probably why I don't have too many stories out there. But
so we've been going for an hour now, and I have one more question for you. What was your favorite book or comic book growing up? Your favorite title?
oh, that's a lot tougher I there's so many things that I enjoyed. Um, Spider-Man, X-Men, they got me hooked into comic books. and by that I probably mean the Todd McFarlane, Eric Larson era of Spider-Man, and then the Jim Lee, Chris Claremont era of X-Men.
Yeah.
Oh, my earbuds are telling me that we've definitely been talking for over an hour because they just said boop, 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 boop.
Yeah. So thank you very much for this wonderful conversation. We will always have more to talk about next time. I'm assuming there will be a next time. Thank you, Aaron, for this wonderful, heartfelt conversation.
It's been a blast, and I'd love to do it again sometime.
Okay, great. Awesome. Okay, take care.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.